Hello, everybody. Welcome back to It's Called Football as we quickly bring you a recap of what took place in Matchday 16 of the Premier League. We know that the matches have been done since Sunday. Apologies that we couldn't get this out a little bit earlier, but things have been busy on this end as well. But hey, better late than never. And for all your quick highlights of what happened over the weekend, if you just want to relive it or if you happen to miss some of the action and want to quickly figure out what all happened, big stories, etc. Well, this is your go-to place for it. So let's get right into it. Some of the big games on match day 16 saw Crystal Palace take on Liverpool, Brighton take on Burnley, Manchester United host Bournemouth, Sheffield United welcome Brentford to town, and Nottingham Forest, whose manager Steve Cooper is currently reportedly facing danger of the sack, traveled to Wolves, where they desperately needed some result of any kind to stop this run of defeats they've been on. It took until the 90th minute for Liverpool to come back after falling behind to Crystal Palace, but come back they did. Um, the quality that Liverpool have in their attack is, I think, honestly, the best that anyone in the league currently has to offer. And it was on full display as they managed to turn around a one goal deficit to a 2-1 victory within the last minutes of the game and take all 3 points. Brighton, on the other hand, surprisingly dropped points at home against Burnley. Burnley's keeper was a large factor for this. He made some truly incredible saves to keep Burnley in the game. And Burnley actually did go ahead before Brighton leveled it late on in the match. And they could have won it, honestly, if it wasn't for Burnley's keeper making some truly majestic saves. AFC Bournemouth, though, probably pulled off the shock of the weekend as they ran out 3-0 winners away to Manchester United. That is the first time that Manchester United have lost a match by 3 goals or more to a team that's in the bottom half of the table, especially when United are at home. So quite an unwanted record for United to have right now, and in a season that just continues to lack any sort of consistent direction. Sheffield United also did themselves a huge favor, somehow managing to keep Brentford out and scoring one themselves to take a vital 3 points in this season that has largely been a struggle for Sheffield United. And Nottingham Forest did manage to finally end their string of defeats, clinching a draw away at Wolves, which is no mean feat whatsoever. They are a very tough side to play against, and credit to Forest for managing to take a draw out of it. We had one more match on Saturday, probably the big one as far as league table standings were concerned, as Aston Villa took on Arsenal. And then we saw 4 games on Sunday with Everton hosting Chelsea, Fulham hosting West Ham, Luton Town hosting Manchester City, and then the biggest one of the weekend, Tottenham Hotspur welcoming Newcastle United. I'll be honest, going into the weekend and knowing Aston Villa's record at home, I wasn't hugely optimistic as an Arsenal fan. And although Arsenal did play well, they lacked a little bit of the killer finish in the box to try and finish off chances. Had they taken their chances, Arsenal would have won this game fairly comfortably, and I don't think there can be any blame really proportioned anywhere other than the fact that the Arsenal players didn't take their chances, despite the fact that they made plenty. As it is, sometimes this happens in football. Sometimes you will not play games well and still manage to sneak a win, and sometimes you'll play games well and still lose the game. And that's essentially what happened here. Aston Villa scored an early goal and then defended quite well, applied pressure to Arsenal at the right times to try and put them off from being able to score their chances, which is basically what happened. Arsenal will kind of be kicking themselves there for that one, but so be it. A game, however, that didn't really have any sort of um, dubiousness around it, if that's the right word, was Everton against Chelsea. Everton had two wins in a row going into this one, where they won 1-0 away at Nottingham Forest the previous weekend, and then also won 3-0 at home against Newcastle midweek. They followed this up with a third win in the space of 7 days and a third clean sheet with a 2-0 win over Chelsea that was deserved and really shows how well Everton are clicking and how much progress they could have been making if it wasn't for their points deduction. Fulham also is another side that caught the eye because they followed up their 5-0 win in midweek with another 5-0 win over London rival West Ham United. A really different trajectory that Fulham have now been on over the last few games, and there's a lot that they can be positive about going into this. The goal scoring obviously is a big thing, especially because their main striker from last season transferred to a club in Saudi Arabia over the summer, which had raised a lot of question marks about Fulham's capability in front of goal. It looked like the absence of that striker was costing them for a long time, and now they have somehow managed to score 10 goals in 2 games, um, perhaps suggesting that they've found a way to work around this system. Manchester City actually fell behind to Luton Town, and then, similar to Liverpool at Crystal Palace, City came back to win it 2-1 later on in the game, although not quite as late as Liverpool had left their win. And Tottenham Hotspur, despite the injuries, they did get a couple of key players back from suspension, and it showed because Newcastle injuries meant that their squad wasn't quite as in their rhythm as perhaps you would want, or as much as Newcastle would want at least, because Tottenham actually went 4-0 up and only conceded to a very, very late consolation goal to Newcastle that didn't really have any impact on the overall scoreline or the storyline that the game took. Make no mistake, this was a dominant performance by Tottenham, and they fully deserved their win. Arsenal's defeat to Aston Villa meant that Villa have now closed the gap on second place. They still sit third, but only a point short of Arsenal. And Liverpool, in the meantime, winning the game meant that they have leapfrogged Arsenal for now into first place. Uh, so obviously, it's a very tight race there at the top. And while a lot of people are saying the title race is still between Liverpool, Arsenal, and Manchester City, I think it's a little bit unfair to Aston Villa to suggest that they're not in this, at least for the time being. Whether they have the depth on their bench and the quality of their players to see it through for an entire season obviously remains to be seen. But there's no denying that at the moment, Aston Villa are just as much in this title race debate as anybody else. The points tally does not lie. Tottenham, Manchester United, Newcastle, Brighton, West Ham all actually kind of kept their places in the league table for now with their various results. Despite Manchester United losing to Bournemouth, they had enough of a points gap on the teams below them to not lose a place as a result. Now, the goal difference, of course, is another matter. Same goes for West Ham after their destruction at the hands of Fulham. And Fulham, on the other hand, who were kind of struggling for form and languishing a little bit in the bottom half of the table, seemingly with no way out for several weeks on end, now have a goal difference that has evened itself out, and they have actually broken into the top half. Um, Incredible, really, turnaround by them over the last few games, and we'll talk a little more about them slightly later on in this, but huge credit to them for their turnaround right now. Bottom half also sees some sides that have had a huge turnaround, as well as some that have cause for concern. Brentford's surprise defeat to Sheffield United meant that they missed a chance to break into the top half, but Chelsea losing at Everton meant that their goal difference has taken enough of a hit to drop them down to 12th, below Brentford now, and basically swapping places with Fulham for the time being. Wolves are also right there now, breathing down Chelsea's neck, as are Bournemouth, who have continued to pick up points. They've now got 16 points out of their last 21 possible available ones, meaning out of their last 7 games, they've only lost once, drawn once, and won 5. Uh, Amazing considering they've got 5 wins on the board here. And they've picked them all up in those last 7 games. So really, really good turnaround from Bournemouth as well. Crystal Palace now have a little bit of catching up to do in terms of points on Bournemouth and a couple of teams above them. And Palace, of course, are a side that are struggling now. They've lost a few games in a row. They're just not picking up results the way they used to, especially at home, which will be a cause for concern for their fans, their players, their manager, everybody associated with the club. Nottingham Forest is another side that is suffering from what fans have often called second season syndrome. They managed to save themselves from getting relegated last season, and it looked like they'd kind of hit their stride towards the back end of last season. Now it looks like they're struggling again. And yes, they picked up a draw against Wolves, which was probably crucial to helping save their manager's job for the time being. But they are going to start having to pick up wins on the board very, very soon. If they want any hope of not being dragged into this relegation battle, because now they're dangerously close to being brought into that conversation. Everton is another team. They have not let adversity get in their way whatsoever. That 10 points deduction has had no impact on them. They're out of the bottom three and creating more of a gap between themselves and those three sides at the foot of the table. Their goal difference is much healthier than the teams around them, which means as long as they keep on picking up wins, they will fly up that table in no time. Should be worth noting that if they hadn't had that points deduction, Everton would be sitting on 23 points right now, which would be enough for 10th place currently in the Premier League. So huge credit to Everton for not letting that points deduction get them down mentally and instead using it as extra incentive to keep on fighting. Luton losing to Manchester City meant that they didn't get to create any breathing space between themselves and the bottom two sides. And Burnley's draw combined with Sheffield United's win means that the bottom two now have exactly the same wins, draws, and losses, and thus the same points tally, although Burnley obviously have that advantage in goal difference. So it'll be interesting to see how those bottom three shape up now because now they're very close to each other. Luton did have a lot of breathing space on both Burnley and Sheffield United, and now that breathing space is gone, there's no more room for mistakes from any of those lowest three teams. So, some of the biggest moments that we felt um, should be highlighted from Matchday 16. First of all, Liverpool's consistent never say die attitude, while can be frustrating from the viewpoint of a rival fan, should be admired in general by football fans. Both goal scorers for Liverpool are pictured here. Mohamed Salah scored the equalizer for Liverpool after they'd fallen behind, and then Harvey Elliott, number 19 there in the picture, scored the winner late in the game so that they made sure they took the 3 points that has currently put them top of the table. Manchester City, however, for their to their relief, really, for the first time in 5 games, they have picked up a win again after 3 consecutive draws, followed by a defeat to Aston Villa in midweek. They finally managed to turn things around when it looked like they might be headed towards another poor result when Luton went ahead just before half-time. Both goal scorers are pictured here for Man City as well. Bernardo Silva closer to the front and Jack Grealish behind him were the two that turned it around for Man City. And perhaps this is where they kick on and start finding form again as we head into the busiest part of the festive fixture period. Sheffield saw James McAtee, fan favourite, score his first goal of the season and turned out to be an absolutely vital one to help them see off Brentford in the battle of the red and white striped jerseys. Um, it cannot be understated how big of a victory this is for Sheffield United. Their last one came under fortuitous circumstances when they beat Wolves with a slightly contentious last minute penalty call. But there was no doubt whatsoever about this one. It was just good quality, and it was good that they managed to hold off Brentford, who are a very decent and disciplined side. It takes a lot to be able to stop them from scoring, but somehow Sheffield United did it, and credit to them. Aston Villa is another side that I think is slowly starting to get the recognition they deserve after beating Arsenal in on the weekend and Man City just before that. They've now had two 1-0 wins against two giants in the league, extending their home winning run to 15 matches in a row. Uh, Ever since their last defeat, which was to Arsenal back in February. Uh, Villa are just going from strength to strength, and I think anyone who underestimates them is going to eventually realize their mistake. So huge credit, I think, to Villa, to their manager, to their players, because their turnaround has been nothing short of sensational. And Tottenham will be definitely having a little more positive view after 5 games where they saw four defeats and a draw. They finally managed to claim another win, and it's good for them that it managed to come in a game against another big side where they comfortably dispatched of Newcastle United. Again, perhaps a turning point for Tottenham, but it remains to be seen how well they handle the workload of the busy festive period as it comes with games coming thick and fast. The Premier League has very often had this label of being the best league in the world. And while there are recent developments that could lead you justifiably to cast doubt on that statement, um, such as the officiating and the inconsistencies that are connected with that, there are also aspects that regularly reinforce this. For instance, the top sides somehow all being able to beat each other, and they're not just being one general behemoth that rules over everyone else. Tottenham beating Newcastle 4-1 was part of an interesting little circle that's taken place this season alone, because Newcastle earlier on, just a couple of weeks ago, beat Chelsea 4-1 at home, and Chelsea some time ago had actually managed to beat Tottenham 4-1. A very strange, symmetrical set of results that just shows how anyone can really beat anyone by almost any scoreline, really, in the Premier League. Everton, a side who for the last 2 years have been lackluster, have looked short of ideas, and have barely survived and kept their status in the league. Um, this season seemed to have been revitalized, and almost it feels like that points deduction is what, and the sense of injustice that sort of seemed to be surrounding it, is what finally lit the fire that has spurred them on to the amazing recent run of results that they've had. 3 wins in a row now, and two of them against, top sides in Chelsea and Newcastle, and all 3 victories having come without conceding a single goal. Everton have not let that points deduction get to them whatsoever, and they deserve immense credit. Everybody associated with the club deserves such huge credit for this. Another side that deserves huge credit is Bournemouth, who managed to dispatch of Manchester United with relative ease in their 3-0 win away this past weekend. Bournemouth was another side that, for such a long stretch of games into the start of the season, hadn't got a single win on the board. And if you watch some of our early weeks, we kind of touched on this, that there was a concern that Bournemouth's new manager maybe either wasn't able to get his ideas fully implemented within his squad. Maybe he didn't have the personnel for it, but essentially our question was, would he be given the time to try and turn things around? And it looks like he has, and they're all the better for it. The fact that they have 5 wins out of their last 7 games, including wins against Newcastle and Manchester United in that time, suggests that perhaps they've found their groove, and there's no telling what they might be able to achieve. They're getting close now to being able to push for a top half. We've got some really interesting teams that have suddenly found form, and they could be starting to make waves amongst the best sides. Fulham was another side that were in so much trouble in the opening weeks, and they looked like they were just reliant on wherever they might be able to get goals and salvage results. And yet, over the last four games, I believe Fulham are the highest scorers in the Premier League. Despite that heartbreaking 4-3 defeat to Liverpool, they still managed to score three in that game. And they also scored three in their victory over Fulham before that, plus 10 goals in the last 7 days alone. Um, 5-0 wins consecutively at home against Nottingham Forest and West Ham have created a justifiably feel-good emotion around everyone associated with Fulham. And 16 goals in the last four games is nothing to be sniffed at. That's sensational. And they will absolutely be thrilled with the fact that they're now in the top half of the table. They will not want to let that go, I can assure you. So, how did we do with our predictions? Well, let me answer the short way first. Not well. Palace and Liverpool, I thought Liverpool would find things a lot easier. In reality, they looked a little bit sluggish in their game, if I'm honest. They did win the game as I kind of expected, but it was much narrower than I expected that match to play out. Brighton and Burnley, again, I thought Brighton wouldn't. Maybe this would be the game where they kept a clean sheet for the first time this season. But nope, they just continue to make sure that both they score and that their opponents do as well. This time, Brighton just couldn't make sure that they scored more. Manchester United, I'm shocked at. I thought that on a man-to-man basis, they probably had the more tactically adept personnel, shall we say, to try and take care of Bournemouth, but full credit to Bournemouth, who came as the underdog, showed no fear, and deserved their win. Nowhere close to my prediction here. And the same goes for the next one. I thought Brentford, with all their discipline, with all their tactical knowledge and the way they've set up this season, Sheffield United should have been a match they won without getting out of second gear, really. But fair play. Sheffield United might be feeling a little bit of the pressure now with the need to get results to make sure they don't fall too far behind in this race to escape from the bottom three, and they did it. Full credit. Wolves and Forest. Honestly, I thought Wolves at home, given some of the scalps they've claimed this season already, I thought this would be one that they wouldn't have much of an issue with because Forest have lost 5-0 to Fulham and then 1-0 at home to Everton in the week leading up to this game. But Forest did rally together and managed to rescue something for themselves, which is good for them and glad to see that their manager is staying on. Villa and Arsenal, like I said in my preview, for those of you that watched, this was going to be a very tough game that I was nervous about. And I think had Arsenal taken any of their chances that they had earlier in the first half, they would have won this match because the momentum of the game would have shifted. As it was, sometimes this happens, and Villa take nothing away. They should have won this game, and they're easily one of the league's most entertaining sides right now. Chelsea, I keep on overestimating them. I just think at some point all the quality in their team has to click together, and it's going to create a result. But maybe it's just not happened yet. Um, but anyway, full credit to Everton for continuing to go on. They're really the dark horse at the moment in the league, and they are continuing to pick up result after result, no matter who they're playing against, which is great for them. And I love to see that they're coming back from such a less than ideal situation. After West Ham beat Tottenham, which was a very, very difficult thing to do, especially away to Spurs, I really thought that they would have more fight in them than they showed against Fulham. But similar to Sheffield United, I think Fulham just showed how badly they wanted it and how much they wanted to continue their recent good run of results and goal scoring form in general. Um, Not even close in our prediction, and you know what? Not even sad about it. It's good to see Fulham doing so well. I thought Manchester City would kind of come flying out of the blocks and seal this game fairly routinely. However, news did break before the game that their star striker Erling Haaland was unavailable for this game, which perhaps threw off their rhythm a little bit in their attack because they didn't have that the deadly natural finisher that they've relied on for the last 15, 16 months. As it is, they still did manage to get their victory, but the fact that Luton scored suggests that perhaps there's still some defensive kinks needing to be worked out. And honestly, Newcastle were disappointing. Tottenham were scintillating in their game, and they deserved their win. There's not really a lot that I can say about this, but Newcastle have a problem now because they've already lost more games now this season than they did in the entirety of last. So it's a huge problems for them to figure out, and largely I think a lot of them are based on the fact that they've got so many of their first choice players out with injury, and they have got to kind of create a makeshift team that hasn't necessarily trained together and built that chemistry yet. Obviously, that will come when their players return, but in the meantime, they do need to figure out a solution in the short term. That is where we're going to leave you for today. Again, apologies that this Matchday 16 recap has come out a couple of days late, but we hope you enjoyed it, hope you got something out of it. And if you liked it, please drop a like on the video. Please subscribe to the channel or get your friends to if they haven't already. We will be back very soon with a Matchday 17 preview. And in the meantime, take care, stay safe, and remember, it's called football.